Hello, and welcome to Travel Tales, my weekly podcast. I'm Isabella, the virtual travel agent within the new Journey Hero travel app that will soon be available for you to download. Each episode of this podcast, we visit a particular location around the world and speak with travellers that are empowered by Journey Hero every day. On today's podcast, we have a very special guest, Rosa, the Chief Operating Officer and all-round boss lady of our company. 2.5 years ago, during a pre-pandemic time that seems a great distance from today, Rosa visited Antarctica, which is the basis of this podcast. Welcome, Rosa, and thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you, Isabella. I'm very happy to be talking to you today about Antarctica.
One of the many things we have in common is that we both have visited Antarctica, you in person and me virtually from my base on the cloud. I'm really curious as to why you decided to visit this incredibly remote location.
I've always viewed travelling as an adventure. I wanted to see for myself this remote continent. I really felt nothing could be more adventurous than visiting Antarctica. I also wanted to understand how our human presence on Earth has affected that extreme habitat. The trip was both a test of physical and mental fortitude, and one that I will never forget. This faraway realm of ice and penguins certainly isn't your typical holiday destination, but it is one of the most extraordinary places I've had the privilege of visiting.
That's fabulous, Rosa. Antarctica is the coldest continent, and it's also the driest. Can you imagine that it hasn't rained in Antarctica for 2 million years?
Oh yes, but what really caught my attention is that due to climate change, both the North and South Polar regions are warming much faster than the rest of the world.
For sure. In fact, if the Antarctic ice cap was to melt entirely, then our sea levels would rise by approximately 10 metres. That would put almost every major coastal city underwater. This is why we must all take note of the impact that global warming is having on Antarctica and beyond. That amount of sea rise would submerge Miami, New York City, London, Mumbai, Singapore, Sydney and Rio, just to name a few major cities. So, how did you reach Antarctica?
Travel there is more challenging than other destinations. You're required to have a professional expedition leader. In my case, I had the pleasure of being led by Dixie Dansecourt. We flew from Cape Town, South Africa to Wolfsvang along with the other members of my expedition, who all happened to be amazing women. Once there, we boarded a specially equipped turboprop aircraft, which dropped us at a strategic spot. Once we started our trek, our only form of transport in Antarctica was a pair of cross-country skis, another skill I needed to master, as I actually don't ski. All our gear was loaded into a sledge-like pallet called a pulka, which I pulled as I explored the region. As you can imagine, this is very laborious and tested my endurance.
I'm sure it did. I'll ask you about your preparations shortly, but first, here's a tip for our listeners. It's best to book your expedition to Antarctica during the Southern Hemisphere's summer, which falls within the months of November to March. This is when the weather is kindest.
It may have been summer, which means 24 hours a day daylight when I went, but during my trip we had easily minus 25 and winds of up to 128 kilometers per hour. One time we even had to remain in our tents because of a particularly bad storm for over 20 hours straight.
That's incredible. How did you prepare for the extremes of climate and effort?
The rigours of this style of adventure means that you must be in peak physical and mental health. I spent more than a year preparing by building my stamina, developing my lung capacity, toning my muscles, learning to use my body differently. Oh, and skiing, learning how to ski.
That's for sure. For anyone who's thinking of visiting, remember it's an extreme environment, but the majesty of the vastness is absolutely stunning. You can expect to see sea ice that looks just like frozen waves for as far as you can see in the distance. These remarkable landscapes are devoid of features such as trees and man-made landmarks, excluding the occasional research centre. The absence of these reference points makes it difficult to judge distances without the use of specialist equipment, and this is exactly why you can only explore Antarctica in the company of a guide. Something that you will see many of in Antarctica are nunataks. Also known as glacial islands or glacial oases, nunataks are ridges that protrude from ice fields and glaciers. As they provide shelter and a firm base for construction, these are where most of the research bases are sited. Another natural occurrence that you'll spot during your travels are rapidly forming ice caves. These are caused when water under the ice caps melts and creates voids. This process causes the glaciers to move more quickly as the water reduces friction and the weighty ice slides more easily across the bedrock.
My favourite was the ice caves, the most incredible blue colours and wonderful acoustics. One of the most disconcerting sense experiences is that the environment smells of nothing. The low temperatures prevent aromatic chemicals from reaching your nose. It doesn't smell clean or dirty. It just doesn't smell at all. Very strange.
That's so interesting, Rosa. When you're on the ice, you'll need to prepare your own meals to carry with you, and they have to be high calorie to keep you warm and fuel your exertions. I recommend that you stock up on freeze-dried food before you arrive. Your guide will help you with this. You'll need to melt pure snow to hydrate these meals, and unfortunately, they do lose most of their flavour without smell. Everything that goes with you to the continent comes back out with you, including all packaging, even the things that come out of you.
A few times during our trip, we had the luxury of a hot meal while visiting a research facility. The opportunities are quite fun, but don't expect a Michelin-starred venue. The researchers may be smart and dedicated, but they do lead a Spartan lifestyle.
In a place with 0 restaurants, needless to say, you won't find any bars, cinemas or theatres in Antarctica either. You might add some treats such as boxed wine and chocolate to your packing list, which you can share with your fellow explorers beneath the midnight sun.
Treats are great and well deserved, but weight is so tightly controlled, you won't have room for many.
There are no 5-star resorts or boutique hotels awaiting you in Antarctica. On the whole, accommodation is extremely basic, but that's all part of this unique experience. One option is to stay in one of the semi-permanent eco-cabins that are provided by specialist expedition services. However, spaces in these are limited, and proximity to these cabins limits your ability to explore. Alternatively, you can follow my lead and spend your nights in a tent. Not that you'll know it's night. The sun shines 24 hours per day throughout the Antarctic summer, so you'll need eye patches for sure. If you're worried about the cold, rest assured there is a system in place to ensure you sleep warm and snugly. And if you're sharing with a buddy, then this will add even more warmth.
When setting up camp, you have to dig down several feet into the snow in order to give your tent some shelter from the wind. Then you pile the excess snow on the other side to provide insulation. It's extremely cold, but remarkably cosy. Nonetheless, one time, we actually had to dig out one of our expedition mates after a really bad storm. Remember the 20 hours I said straight in a tent?
Thanks so much for your time, Rosa. It was wonderful hearing about your adventures in Antarctica.
Thanks, Isabella. Good work helping all our fellow travellers. I hope I've given Antarctica the justice it so deserves. It's truly a magical place, and it affected me so profoundly. I'm so grateful I got to visit.
Antarctica is as beautiful as it is forbidding. Preparing to travel to such a remote and challenging place does require more preparation and a generous budget. But I'm sure that you will agree that your expedition is well worth the effort and cost. Once you experience this remarkable environment for yourself, I'm confident you'll feel inspired to do all that you can to preserve it for future generations. And before we go, this podcast is dedicated to the memory of Dixie Dansecourt, who led Rosa's expedition. Dixie lost his life in early June while in Greenland. We knew Dixie as a quiet man with a great sense of fun and humour, but dedicated to his science and the rigours of exploration. He will be remembered fondly as a teacher, guide and mentor. He will be greatly missed by all who knew him and whose lives he touched. Thanks for listening to Travel Tales with me, Isabella. Before we go, show some love by leaving us a review where you found this podcast. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook at Journey Hero app for more travel inspiration of some of the destinations around the globe. You can also sign up to our newsletter from our website www.journeyhero.net to receive updates from me.